I wrote the book because I learned how to coach in the 90s, um, way before it exploded into what it is today. And when I learned it directly from Thomas Leonard. I don't know if any of you heard that name, but you probably saw it in my book. And Thomas Leonard was, as we would call him, the father of coaching because he was the one who created coaching as a profession the way we know it today. And what's happened is with all the different training schools and all the different things that have gone on over the years, I have found that the real true coaching has gotten lost in lots of ways. And I had so much of Thomas's brain inside of me because everything he ever did was so phenomenal. So I decided to write this book and pass on a lot of the things that I learned over the years. So what was it like working with him and learning from him? It was really indescribable because when he started, he had about, I'm going to say 1,000 coaches, kind of, maybe that was, we probably had less, but until he really got going and opened himself more up to the public, so to speak. Matter of fact, that was funny because I always got his emails. And his emails were very often top 10, like top 10 ways to ask questions, or top 10 ways to work with a person who talks too much, or top, whatever it was. And I kept getting those, and I kept thinking, oh my gosh, this must be some old man who is just sending out these emails because nobody ever saw him. Nobody had any idea what he looked like, who he was. We just kept getting these great emails. And then I'm trying to think what year that was. Maybe, I don't know if it was still the late 90s, but he decided to do, he bought an RV, which is like a camper that you travel in. And he literally went all over the United States giving talks. And so when he came to New York City, I went to see him. And the first thing that happened was my shock because I'm picturing, I mean, I don't know if any of you know what Colonel Sanders looks like from the chicken thing. Anyway, he's got a white beard and he's really old. And that's what I was picturing. And there stands this young guy who is in his 40s and, really nice looking. And it was just shocking. But what he explained to us, which I found so fascinating, was that he was doing the tour because he was so shy and hated to talk with people. And so he forced himself to go out and do this tour. And then he did I mean, if I can never ever get across to anybody who wasn't there how much he gave us. And just as a mini example, everybody got in the physical mail a CD, which of course, in those days was a big thing, a CD of 500 coaching forms. And that was just one tiny little thing he did. So you can imagine every day we got something from him, whether it was his how to coach course, whether it was how to coach anyone, whether it was something related to marketing. It didn't matter. He just kept sending us the most fabulous information you could imagine. And I had been trained by a coach who was a psychotherapist who included a lot of psychology. So when I was ready and realized how much I had from both of these guys, I decided I would combine it, and that's really how the book got started. So learning from Thomas was usually it was as if he was experimenting on us, really. Like he would send things out and he would ask for our opinion. And if most of the people said, oh, that sounds crazy or weird or something, he wouldn't do it. And if we all said, oh, that's interesting, then he would go ahead. Plus, he would open up, this was amazing. He would open up his phone line about once every month for a short time. And if you were lucky enough to get call and he would answer, you could ask him any question. And he could change your life with one question. And the other thing that was so outrageous was that he literally answered every email, even if it was one word answers. Every email got answered. And when I say that, you have to imagine this guy had to have gotten, and I'm not exaggerating, at least 500 emails a day that he responded to. And so, anyway, he was just amazing. You get that now. And I never can get it quite across. But I took a lot of what I had learned from him and what I learned from the coach who had been a psychotherapist, and I combined it. And that's how I got to themes and I got to the psychology of coaching as well. Um, so, with that said, the two questions that I talk about in the book that are absolutely critical to hold in mind, right? And the first one is, why is this person telling me this? And I came up with that one because people tell us these stories and they tell us things and we think, why did they go there? So for example, I had a terrible fight with my wife this morning, but you know what? I really need to talk about something happening at work. And then I would think, why? Why did that person have to tell me they had a fight this morning with their wife? And that's when I decided you never ignore those by the way comments. And those usually wind up being more important than whatever it is they want to talk about. And in the book, I'm sure you've already read because it's near the beginning, I put an example where somebody had come and said, I feel so vulnerable sharing this, and it's really hard for me to share, but I really need to talk about my child. I think in the book I said on the swim team or something, but in real life it was something school related. And I really want to know how I'm going to choose the right teacher, whatever it was. And I said, I can hear that you want to talk about your child and what's happening at school, but I'm just wondering what's making this so hard to share and so vulnerable for you. And it wound up, that was the crux of the whole conversation because she was so nervous that something was wrong with her kid. So that's where that question comes from. Don't ever ignore those by the ways. And then the second question, what is making it a problem for this person? That one came from Thomas Leonard. And the reason I love that question so much is because, and I always give this example. So let's suppose Sebastian and I have a date to go to a restaurant. And we make it like 3 weeks in advance. And I ask him to pick his absolute favorite restaurant that he's never been to, but he's so excited to go to. And he picks a restaurant. And then I do the same thing with, I'm just looking at trying to figure if I can pronounce your names. I do the same thing with Yalan. Is that it? Yalan? Yalan. Okay. And we have that date a different time. But each time that it comes up, we're ready for our time, I call Sebastian and I say, you know what? I am so sorry, but I just don't feel well today. And I'm just not going to make it. And I've done the same thing now with Yolande, right? And Subash says, oh, don't worry about it, Marion. We'll just reschedule. And Yolande says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so disappointed. I was so looking forward to, oh, wait, I'm sorry that you're sick, but oh gosh, I really wanted to go." Two completely different reactions, right, to the same circumstances. So, what makes it a problem for one, but not the other? So, when you're listening to your clients, what's making it a problem for this person? Because the next person wouldn't have this as a problem. They would know what to do or they would have handled it already, right? So, if you hold that in mind, it's so helpful because you're trying to understand, why is this person stuck in this situation? Now, what's I want to say dangerous, but that's not the right word. I guess what makes it difficult is if you understand the problem too well. So the person says, "I'm having a lot of problems with my coworker because my coworker always takes credit for my stuff," or whatever. And you actually have had the same exact situation. It gets very tricky because how are you going to be objective? You know what it's like, you know what that feels like. So, my basic way of handling it is to make believe that you have no idea what that's like. As if, because the next coach who would have this person wouldn't have any idea what it's like, right? So they would be really curious. Whereas you are like, "Yep, I get it. I know how awful it is." And there's no coaching can go on because you're right there with the client. The reason that you want to make believe you don't know what they're talking about, as if you don't know, is not only because then you can be curious, but the interesting thing is, when it happened to you, as an example, it bothered you for a different reason than it bothers this person. So nobody reaches the same conclusion because of the same circumstances. Does that make any sense? That people are going to have a problem for a different reason, even though it might sound the same as something you have. Okay. um, and then, I I always share on these talks that I really wanted to name the book "Don't Believe Your Client," but nobody would have ever bought that book because they would have thought I was some kind of a nut job. So I decided that wasn't going to work, but I absolutely had to have a chapter that says "Don't believe the client." How many of you have already read that chapter? Anybody? Okay, good. So the reason is because whatever they report to us, think about it. It's their perception, it's their story, it's the way they see the truth, right? They're not lying to us, they see it a certain way, but that doesn't mean it's true. My boss hates me. Well, you could ask for evidence and they would say, "Oh, he does this, he does that." That's a horrible, horrible thing to do, by the way, in coaching, is to have them back up their belief, right? This is something they believe, and you never want to give them the opportunity to defend what they believe, because you know as well as I know that it might not be true. So my boss hates me. You wouldn't ask, "Well, what happens?" You just say, "And what's that like for you to go to work every day, knowing that you think this?" "Oh my God, it's awful because then I can't do my work really well because I get so nervous that I'm not going to please him," or whatever it is. Now you're getting good information, right? So because it's a belief, we don't know it's a fact. And if it is happening, let's say it feels very much like my boss hates me, but then you find out that he's like that with everybody because he's going through a divorce and he's not nice to anyone, right? So take what they give you and make sure that you doubt them. Not that you think they're lying to you, but you have to be skeptical. You have to dig in and question in a way that helps you see what's really true here. Because they'll just tell you anything. And if you just say, okay, then you've lost the opportunity. Okay. The other thing I am crazed about, really crazed, is that we want to use what questions. I don't know how it translates in another language, but it's automatically an open question. It's not a how question because that would be a methodology. This is how I did it, basically. You don't want a why question because then they're going to defend themselves. So however you translate that into your language, it has to be an open what question. Okay. And then the only other thing I'm going to quickly talk about, and then, I can go on forever. But my favorite thing, which unfortunately now in the new competencies has gotten lost. So in the old competencies, we had 11 of them. I don't know if anybody was around for those, but okay, 9, 10, and 11 were actually kind of enmeshed, which is now number 8. So we now have 1 to 8, but one is about mindset, one is about ethics. So we really have, as far as I'm concerned, 3 to 8. And what really got lost in that translation is under evokes awareness, number 11, which is about direct communication. And that got lost. And that's too bad because it was my absolute favorite. And the reason it was my favorite, well, first of all, I'm from New York, so I'm very big on just saying whatever comes to my mind. But more importantly, I set up in the book, if you haven't gotten there yet, ways to say anything you want to say to the client. Anything, right? With 3 rules or 3 guidelines. You can say anything you want. So, one of those rules is you don't use the word you. So, I would never say to Pushpa, you look confused. I would never say that. I would say, Pushpa, it seems like there's some confusion going on. Do you see how I'm doing that? I'm not saying you sound or you look, but I get the impression that there's some confusion. What do you think? So what am I doing there? I am sharing my observation the way I see it, right? Right or wrong, I don't care. I could be dead wrong. Doesn't matter. But it's my thinking of what I'm perceiving. I am not accusing Pushpa feeling anything or looking any way. I'm just saying I get the impression that there might be some confusion. And then I check it out with the client. And the other day on a call, somebody did something similar, but the faux pas, do you know what I'm saying when I say faux pas? That's the error, we'll say, or the mistake was they then asked a regular question as opposed to it seems like there's confusion. What do you think? You can't go past that because you're guessing, right, on what you think is going on, and you could be wrong. So you don't make that assumption, you question it, and then you can move on when they've told you whether it's accurate or not accurate, if that makes sense. So let me just, oh my gosh, there's so many things here. So yes, without attachment to the outcome, because we don't care if we're right or wrong, doesn't matter. We're just checking it out. We think, you hear something, you say, oh, I think there's some anger going on. And the client says, no, I'm not angry, I'm annoyed. Okay, we got the thing we needed, right? So it's important to, again, don't let it away with anything. All right, I'm going to stop here for now. And let's see if some of you can ask some really cool, difficult questions. Because I love the challenge, because otherwise I've heard them all. So, yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Anybody
thank
with
you.
a question?
Yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts there and letting us know how your journey's been at this point. So you set the bar pretty high for us this morning. Uh, Difficult, challenging questions. That's gonna be a lot of fun. Okay. Well, we do have a couple of questions in the queue here. But if anyone wants to raise their hands right now, we can go ahead and start that way.